There is a painting here at 11 Madison Park. It's a chalkboard painting that has mostly been wiped clean. The painting was a collaboration with my dear friend, the renowned artist Rita Ackerman. During our renovation, we wanted to create something to symbolize a new beginning. The concept of a chalkboard was perfect. It showed our willingness to erase and redraw, to start anew, to rethink. And there is a lot we need to rethink today, and now more than ever, the way we eat. I've lived in New York for more than a decade. Restaurants are such an important part of the fabric of this city. But right now, with so many of them closed, and with so many more at risk of closing, the loss is profound. Restaurants are the cornerstones of our communities. They celebrate our differences, what makes our cultures distinct. They can transport us across oceans and borders. They can bring us home. In a time of distancing and division, that seems more and more like a miracle. But what restaurants mean, what restaurants do, is evolving too. There's no other choice. So in our own current state of crisis, we need to use this opportunity to wipe the chalkboard clean and rethink the role of a restaurant in our society. By we, I don't just mean a chef like me, I mean all of us. We all have a stake in the answer. But first, we need to reframe the question. It's not just how will restaurants survive, but who do we serve? My own answer to that is evolving too. When you walk down the streets of New York today, you come across long lines, I mean seriously long lines, stretching for blocks and blocks. And the thing you notice about the men and women and the children in these lines is they're holding empty bags, pushing empty carts, bags and carts they hope to fill at food pantries. These people, our neighbors, are experiencing food insecurity. This was a crisis before the pandemic, one that especially affected households of color, adults with disabilities, and families and kids. But the pandemic has made things dramatically worse. In New York, it has pushed tens of thousands of people to food pantries, often for the first time. Today, 1.5 million New Yorkers are unable to afford food. And across the nation, 1 in 6 Americans are expected to face food insecurity this year. That includes almost 17 million children. At the same time, the pandemic has driven my industry to the brink of extinction. COVID-19 threatens up to 85% of restaurants in New York, and as restaurants close, farm suppliers are forced to get rid of tens of millions of pounds of excess foods. For me, the collision of these two crises, people going hungry, restaurants and suppliers sitting idle and dumping food, brought the issue into focus in a way that little else has. But that forced me to take a step back, to do some soul searching, and to rethink my goals. One of our chefs, Matt Joswiak, began to do exactly that. He saw how much excess food we had at the restaurant. He had the idea, and it was a great idea, that he could use the food to create meals and give them to people in need. He started a non-for-profit organization called Rethink Food. Over the next few years, I worked with Matt to recruit other restaurants to join. The idea seemed to be catching on, building momentum. Then, the pandemic. It took only a few days until 11 Madison Park was closed. And it took only a couple of weeks before we had to lay off our entire team. People who had been here for years. Some who had moved here from Asia, South America, Australia, Europe, who had to return home. Our restaurant was a community, but more than that, it was our family. That family was gone and might never come back. And for a while, it seemed that New York wouldn't either. Overnight, the busiest streets in the world just emptied out. Emptied of cars, bikes, people. Suddenly I could hear birds I never heard before. But I also heard the ambulances at every hour of the day. I saw Central Park turned into a field hospital. For weeks, I mourned the tens of thousands of deaths, including my old friend, Floyd Cardoz, whose restaurant Tabla was right next to mine. And across the city, I saw the lines at the food pantries grow and grow. All the while, my restaurant was sitting empty, unused. My staff was out of work. I was talking to farmers who were destroying food, while more and more people were going hungry. Suddenly, I saw that I was in a position to help. I'm certainly no doctor, I'm not a first responder, but as a chef, I know how to mass produce healthy, delicious meals. Chefs have the skill, the space, the connections that soup kitchens don't. So we made a decision to reorient 11 Madison Park, reimagine it for the pandemic. We started doing research, visiting the soup kitchens, the commissaries all over New York, to learn more about cooking and distributing these free meals. And I brought back members of my team to reopen our kitchen. In April, we turned the lights back on. There were only 10 of us, all wearing masks, all a little bit afraid and uncertain, all wondering if we should have just stayed home. But after a few days, the kitchen felt like the safest and most important place we could be. I finally felt I was making a difference. I felt connected to my work in a way that I hadn't in years. I fell in love again with the craft, the same love I thought I would feel when 11 Madison Park was named the best restaurant in the world. And it's not just me. My staff felt the same way. Since then, we produced over 500,000 of meals at 11 Madison Park alone. We've done it efficiently, as restaurants are designed to do. And the food is delicious. People have told us they had the best meal of their lives. That's what they used to say at 11 Madison Park too, but this meant more. I talked about the magic of food, but this was a different kind of magic, one I thought we could scale. I had found a way to help my city. I had found a way to keep my restaurant open. Could this work for other restaurants? Could it provide a lifeline to help people? For the first time, I began to view a restaurant as a community institution. This was a new idea for me, but I realized I was late to the game. Across New York, we found restaurants making an impact, often at great personal risk. We found a church kitchen in Harlem delivering free food to its neighbors. We met the owner of a soul food restaurant in Brooklyn who had become a beacon of hope. We saw employees at a family-owned Mexican restaurant in the Bronx, workers who risked deportation to come to work, who can't be paid because the restaurant has no money, who are out delivering meals anyway. Even in cases where they have very little, they give everything. But running and sustaining a restaurant is hard. Profit margins are thin, and we don't have much of insulation against the crisis. 11 Madison Park, for all of its success, was a case in point. Almost overnight, we couldn't pay rent. We couldn't pay our staff. And if we couldn't, what was the restaurant down the street supposed to do? What we're doing at 11 Madison Park and at restaurants all over the city is a powerful thing. It doesn't just address food insecurity. It helps restaurants save jobs. It's helping our neighborhoods maintain the places that mean so much. And the power of this model is that the infrastructure is already in place. We're using food that otherwise is being wasted. We're distributing meals through networks that already exist. And we're using chefs who understand the food system. So the changes we're making don't have to be just crisis measures. They can be permanent. They should be permanent. When we're able to fully reopen, we should be able to keep serving the broader community because we got a system that is cheaper, more efficient, more effective, and more delicious than what we had before. If we're successful, we can actually ensure that every American has consistent access to healthy meals. We can end food insecurity in this country once and for all. But to achieve it, all of us have to play a role. Chefs also need to push the critics and the awards organization, James Beard's 50 Best, Michelin Sagat, to broaden the range of the values we celebrate. I still believe that cooking is an art form, and we should continue to honor chefs who advance the culinary arts, who move us in ways we didn't expect. But we should also find ways to celebrate restaurants for other achievements, for their diversity, their inclusivity, their social impact. We need to give restaurants more incentives to not just create the best food, but also to do the most good. Of course, no awards organization, however prestigious, has the power you do. I'm asking all of you to help create an industry that is truly worthy of the communities we serve. You can do that by becoming more mindful about where you spend your dollars. You can choose restaurants based not just on their rankings, but also on their heart. At Rethink, we had the idea that we could help people to do that, to help identify restaurants with a higher purpose. Think of LEED certification you see on buildings that meet standards of going green. Our system, Rethink Certified, works the same way, to communicate that a restaurant is dedicated to ending hunger. Of course, our idea is just one of many, and hopefully others will join us in this mission. Hopefully the private funding we're receiving, distributing these meals, will show corporations and the government how well this model works and how much it can scale. Because we have to remember, the pandemic didn't cause food insecurity, it made it worse. And when the pandemic is over, the food crisis will still be with us. There will still be a shocking number, an unacceptable number of Americans who are eating too little or unhealthy foods. But I'm full of hope, more so today than in a long time, because this is not a problem of not enough food. This is a problem of organization, distribution, and communication. These are problems we've begun to solve. This is a system we've begun to change. I believe this is a new beginning, not just for 11 Madison Park, but for all of us. A clean chalkboard, a clean slate, as we redraw the role of the restaurant. Yes, let us fill it again with beautiful guests, but also let us infuse it with purpose. Thank you so much for listening.